So this week's Mailbag edition. Remember, these are questions that you guys leave on the channel, so I'm doing my humble best to try and answer your questions or respond to the comments that have been made. There is one comment that was made on the channel fairly recently that I'm sort of working out whether I'm going to respond to it or not, but that's a different kettle of fish. If I do, I do. If I don't, I don't. This one comes from, and I apologise for getting your name wrong, Payet Laros. So how do you like the System 8 so far? And this was actually left quite a while ago, and again, as I've said on recent mailbags, I'm now starting to catch up on comments that have been left on the channel now that I can actually see that I haven't responded to them. It's been very difficult up till this point, and I obviously am a one-man band. I don't have a team of media experts around me to allow me to respond to these on my behalf. Anyway. This was in response to the system update in the firmware done in 2016. So, what would I say? I would say I've had this synthesizer now 3 years, just coming up to 3 years. So I think I got it in around about November 2016. And if I were to criticise anything about the System 8, I would criticise the plasticiness of it. It doesn't feel very sturdy. It never has felt very sturdy. Whereas the new Jupiters are built like tanks, which is sort of kind of where I feel the System 8 is going now. Is the Roland will slowly start to sort of cease System 8 support, and the Jupiters will take over with the new ZEN-Core modelling system. So I've always felt it's a little bit plasticky, and I've always been a little bit annoyed with the Roland that they took it so far. They promised quite a lot, and they really haven't delivered in System 8 terminology. Having said that, the System 8 is still a cracking synthesizer with the plugins or plug-outs, whichever way you want to go with it, and the ability for you to actually use those legendary synths on that board and conjunction with each other. That I find really, 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 really useful. Never really been hamstrung by the voice limitation per se, but it's always something in the back of your mind. So there you go. That's what I feel about the System 8. So the next one comes from Mike Law, and there are a number of comments on the channel that are very, very similar to this. So I am actually going to do a very short video and stick it up on the channel for anybody who wants to watch it. Just sort of showing this. And it says, where can I get the system drive? The system drive and drivers are the same thing or not? Please help me. I stuck my synth badly. I bought it at version 1.01. And again, this was in response to exactly the same video that I just commented on to Power Up. And as I said, check out the video. There will be a short video going up showing where you can get all the drivers and all the other stuff for any ARIA boutique, etc. stuff. So check. There will be a video going up very, very shortly about this stuff. But in general terms, go to Roland.com. Now, I have to be honest and say they've improved the site considerably over the last couple of years. But originally it was very difficult to find some of this stuff, but now they've made it a hell of a lot easier. So hopefully the video I'm going to put up shortly, if you're still unsure, go watch that, because it will tell you exactly how to get hold of this stuff and how to install it. Now the next one is from a frequent commenter on the channel, a very constructive commenter on the channel, I might add, and that's Don Devore. And it's a bit of a long one, and it is in response to the SMR I did a few weeks back called What the Hell is ZEN-Core? And there have been a number of comments on ZEN-Core, so but I do stand by what I've said on ZEN-Core so far, because I have seen nothing that actually disproves what I've said is not actually true. So what you're saying is ZEN-Core is a PCM sample playback engine that runs through an ACB style model of filters and envelopes. That's kind of what I thought they were doing after seeing those old JV 1080 patches on the Jupiter X. I'm going to carry on. Based on these trends, we should be seeing Korg produce or reissues of the Trinity and the Triton in 2025, but with USB-C and SD slots instead of SCSI drives and floppy disks. I've been playing the System 8 every day for 2 years, never had a problem with it only being 8 voices. Polyphony hasn't been an issue for me since it's not designed for multi-timbral mode that would typically use for multi-track MIDI sequencing or stacking layers in performance mode, as in the JV, XP and XV series. I'm sure if you hold a cluster of keys down in performance mode with long release times, it would show the voice limitation, but I've never found being at a loss for these voices. I use it for pads, polysynth, chords and mono-lead sounds mostly, exactly as I do. The boutiques are pretty good sounding toys for children to learn how to grown-up people make electronic music. I love that. All this yakking about, Roland. Have you ever owned an Ensoniq keyboard? They made a lot of great synths and samplers back in the 80s and 90s that are still running today. So many issues or many comments there. So how do I start? Well, the first thing I would turn around and say, yeah. Everything I have read and seen about the ZEN-Core engine points to a PCM-based system. I have seen nothing that says, well, I've actually seen it quoted a couple of times in literature, having done a lot of research on ZEN-Core. Roland seemed to be keeping very tight-lipped about the whole architecture of ZEN-Core, if I'm honest. They were very sort of open about the architecture of ACB, but the ZEN-Core there seems to be a sort of tight-lippedness, if that's a word, for how ZEN-Core works. So unless somebody comes along and says, John, you've got it completely wrong, it doesn't work like that, it works like this, everything I've seen says it is this PCM used for the generation of the waveform, and then it's using some sort of circuitry modeling for application of filters and envelope and various other bits and bobs that you would put onto that waveform to give you the production sound. But now you commented, going on to the sort of the Korg comment. Now you commented. I mean, I think Yamaha tried to emulate the Aria stuff with their Reface products, but I've not really seen Korg go down the same route yet. And it would be interesting to see what synthesizers Korg would do this with. I'm not sure they would do it with a Triton or a Trinity. I mean, it'd be interesting if they did sort of reintroduce those brands. But technology has moved on. So what Roland have done is they've taken a legendary piece of equipment and they've remodeled it for the current day. So with Korg, I mean, Korg had some fantastic synthesizers back in the day, and those are the ones I think that they would pick up and remodel and relaunch if they were going to do anything like this. But I've seen, and whether they're going to do it or not is a different matter. I mean, I've seen no statements either way, to be honest. But it would be fab, wouldn't it? But on the flip side, what would I do with my lovely Kronos? And moving on to the sort of the comments on the System 8, I have also never playing the System 8 had a problem with 8-voice polyphony or 8 voices being generated in sequence. However, if you are using a sequencer to trigger the System 8, I have on quite a few occasions now had problems with the release of one note to generate the tone of another when you get close to 8 notes being played together. So I have experienced it with a sequencer but never playing. So I agree with you on that. And now we come on to Ensoniq. Now Ensoniq, I've always had a wish to buy some Ensoniq equipment, and I've kind of not done it because whereas I feel quite comfortable with Korg, Yamaha and Roland equipment because I sort of kind of grew up with that stuff. You know, I sort of went through phases of having Yamaha and phases of having Roland and phases of having Korg equipment. I've never ever owned anything by Ensoniq, and I sort of have on my list of synthesizers two that potentially I might buy if the price was right. The two I would probably buy would be the SQ80 and the SQ2. Now, I borrowed an SQ80 many years ago and thought it was a fab piece of equipment, but I never really got under the skin of the synthesizer. I was, at that point in time, I borrowed it because it had some fairly good pad sounds that I wanted to use for a project I was doing at the time. So I really just used it with the pad sounds with a couple of tweaks on it, and that was it. I didn't really sort of get under the bonnet of how you program sounds and how you modify the production sound. So so it's sort of, with me, the sort of pads and strings were extremely warm. That was my recollection. But other than that, I've never really sort of got into the buy-in habit of Ensoniq. It is something I'm thinking about. When I do relocate, possibly that's the point where I will think about buying some Ensoniq equipment, but we'll see. And finally, the last one for this section from Hob Faber. And this, he writes in response to the Roland A-880 transplant video I did back in 2016 again. And he says, just an obvious question I still want to ask, did you check the backup battery of the 42,020 volt A-80? Yes, I did. In response to that, the first thing I did was change the battery. And it still didn't work properly. So there was definitely more of a fault on the board than I could find at the time. As I said, I'm generally au fait with electronics and modifying and maintaining stuff, but there are times where it goes a little bit beyond my head. In fact, my skills have probably got better in the last 3 to 5 years than they ever have been, because I've been taking more things to pieces with scopes and meters and checking out what's going on. But back in 2016, I couldn't find the fault. I didn't have a service manual available to me, so unfortunately, the 220, the guts of the 220 unit were sold on for spares. So somebody else may have managed to fix the problem, but if I'm brutally honest, it wasn't me. And that's it for this week.
Remember, hit that like button if you like what you saw. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified about more rants, more mailbag, more questions and answers, and more videos about this sort of stuff when it's loaded to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.